as with the date correction. I think that would be clearer.
I move that the minutes be corrected with the date correction.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
I will second it, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Any discussion? I will abstain from the vote since I wasn't present at the meeting.
Mr. Chair, if it would please, I would like to also do a roll call vote for this motion since I'm still experiencing some technical difficulties.
Okay, please proceed.
I apologize. Committee Member Postic.
Yes.
Committee Member Dean.
I'm going to abstain.
Committee Member Doherty.
Yes.
Committee Member Housel.
Yes.
Committee Member Joyce.
Yes.
Committee Member Larson.
Yes.
Committee Member Templeton. Committee Member Templeton. Committee
He's
Member
muted.
Torres.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Committee Member Torres.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, this motion passes with 6 ayes and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Hang on just 1 second though. Let's count those numbers because there's 9 of you all. And so I think we might have missed a vote in there, Jennifer. I know we had 2 abstentions. We had the chair and Michelle Dean abstained. And then it was my understanding there were 7 yeses. Is that what you have, Jennifer?
Yes, Laura, I apologize. I had
That's
1
fine.
less check mark.
Okay, so it was 7 yeses, 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, I have a question as far as on Prime Gov.
Yes, sir.
All I'm seeing is the item 2 approval for minutes. It's taking up most of my screen. What?
Yes,
Is
that is
that-
because I was unable to activate that motion inside of PrimeGov. So once you activate the next item, I'll be able to move through the rest of the agenda for you.
Okay. Again, because it's covering up my whole screen, can you show me item 3? What is that? Is that the cases dismissed or?
That's cases withdrawn.
Okay, thank you. Now I can see. Okay, item 3, there's none. Item 4, continuance request, none. Item 5, consent
Chair, if I
docket.
might, this is Laura, if I might interrupt at this point. One of our committee members needs to recuse himself for this item. Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, this is John Joyce. I have to recuse myself for the, I believe the item on the consent agenda, the Vicky Van Stavern item. I
Yes.
need to recuse myself for that item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John, for letting us know, and thanks for the reminder, Laura.
Mhm.
Is there any discussion on this?
I'd like to just request that Laura Griggs kind of give us an update on this item, because the last time it came before our committee, it was continued to be discussed, to be voted upon at a future meeting. I expected to see it when it came back on cases for individual consideration, but now it's on consent docket. So Laura, would you mind giving us an update?
Just double checking with legal. Does there need to be a motion to pull this item for discussion?
I think that you can proceed to give a quick summary, but if the committee wants to have a substantive discussion of the item, then it would be appropriate to have a vote to pull it.
Okay, thank you. Laura Griggs, Planning Department. At the last time you saw this one, the applicant indicated that she wanted to file an appeal on the staff decision that a minimum 2-story structure height was required at this location. And so you continued it to allow that to occur. It went to the, and Cameron, hang on just 1 second, because I'm just going to do a brief summary, so we're not really doing a whole presentation yet. It went to the Board of Adjustment, and I included a summary in your staff report of the action by the Board of Adjustment. I believe some of you also listened to the meeting to hear what that was about. The Board of Adjustment sustained the appeal, which meant they confirmed that the height requirement in DTD 2 does not apply, and that the overlay no height restrictions, minimum or maximum, would be what would be applied in this case. And that meant that a variance wasn't required for maintaining a one-story structure. I attached a copy of the board order as well as their application that they submitted. With that in mind, the issues that staff had, which dealt with the regulation on the height, was no longer in question. And that is why it was put on the consent docket.
So if this is Barbara Larson, if this is on the consent docket, do we have the ability to discuss it further?
Only
You
if we,
You can pull it from the consent docket if you would like to discuss it.
I would like to discuss it. I have one question to ask of the committee members to determine whether or not there's something else we need to consider.
Okay, so I
Okay.
believe we need a motion for that in a second. Am I correct with legal there?
Yes.
yes. So the chair would entertain a motion to pull this item.
This
I
is
would like
Gloria,
to
so moved.
Do we have a second?
second, Barbara.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote.
And just to clarify right now, you're just voting on pulling the item for discussion.
Correct.
Okay. And so Jennifer, I'm not sure how that works out in PrimeGov.
Thank you all. Is committee member Doherty ready to vote on this item?
Yeah, and I don't see the voting buttons there.
Yes, sir. How would you like to vote on this item?
In favor.
Thank you.
This is committee member Dana Templeton. I see where I was the one to make that motion. Is that something that needs to be corrected?
Yeah, that was actually a committee member, Torres made the motion, and then Barbara was the second.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. I will note it in the minutes.
Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and go with item 6A, and we'll do item 5 after that. 6A is case SRCA-20-00027 at 1114 South Robinson Avenue. Laura?
Thank you. There is actually 2 addresses for this project, and I want to clarify because I received a phone call from an adjacent property owner. I want to assure, and so Cameron, we're not on this item, we're on the other one now. That one, thank you so much. I want to assure everybody that what we are talking, and I'm having feedback issues, sorry, that what we're talking about today is demolishing the pink buildings, not the black buildings.
Laura, if you'll forgive my interruption, should we invite committee member Joyce to rejoin our meeting?
Oh, thank you so much. I totally failed to mention that. Yes, since he didn't have a conflict on this, I think it would be appropriate to recognize him as a voting member back in the meeting while we do this item. If you want to make that announcement, Mr. Joyce.
John Joyce will rejoin us.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the buildings in question. They have been set on fire recently. They have had the overhead doors stolen. They have had other materials stolen and a lot of damage done to them. Because they were indicated to be contributing to a potential historic district, Hubcap Alley, we had to put them on your agenda. Staff, however, doesn't necessarily feel that this construction type, which definitely is not a, it's not a masonry sturdy construction type, would stand the test of time. We included the demolition guidelines in the staff report, as well as other purpose and intent information from DTD2. And we questioned the significance on this one, even though the intensive level survey done in 2012, which is phase 4, indicated that this was contributing under criteria A, commerce, and C, architecture. I understand the commerce, but not necessarily the architecture. You might recall that all of the buildings on the opposite side of Robinson had been torn down for the south part of the park. And that included some contributing and non-contributing buildings to this potential district. I included the survey forms that were done for these 2 buildings. And one of the issues we discussed that I think is the most appropriate is structural integrity, which, as you can tell from looking at the pictures, are really the structural integrity, especially when you look at the pictures they provided from the inside. I think most people would agree that is a big concern right now. They have gone in and fenced it off to try to keep people out of it. And staff feels that their application does meet the guidelines and regulations, and we are recommending the demolition of the pink buildings. I just want to clarify that. I'm sorry, I don't remember the owner that called me who owns the buildings to the north. She just wanted to make sure her buildings weren't going to be demoed, because unfortunately, when OG&E went out to cut off the electricity for these buildings, they cut off her electricity. So there is some confusion on addresses down there. The applicant, Greg Banta, is on the call, and I'm sure he's here to answer any questions if you have any questions for him.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Greg, would you like to say anything?
Thank you for taking the time to consider this. We call that building 1112 and 1114 South Robinson, based on the numbers that are painted on the building. There's been some confusion exactly what address is which building. So, but we would like to take them down. We've had a tremendous amount of problems in the building over the last 60 days. We've had the police out at least 4 times. We've had a stolen vehicle parked in the building while they were trying to strip it. We've had 2 fires. Someone came in over the weekend and took all the overhead doors off the building. We've had someone arrested while trying to pull the metal off the building on the top. Someone went and cut the pecan tree that was behind the building down, I guess for smoking wood, which has caused a big mess. They stole the fence that we had around the building. We've refenced it. We're trying to refence it. It's a dangerous structure, and people keep milling around in there. And I'm worried that someone's going to get hurt or worse. And we have contracted with Midwest Wrecking to take it down, take the slab, everything, and make it a nice slick lot. So hopefully it'll be ready for development pretty soon.
Thank you very much, Greg. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion.
This is Committee Member Dana Templeton. I'd like to make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with regulations and guidelines of the Scenic River Overlay Design District zoning ordinance and the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report.
I
Thank you,
second that
Dana.
motion.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone. This is Jennifer. Committee Member Doherty, are you able to vote on this item?
No, it's not coming up. I am in favor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Joyce, are you able to vote in PrimeGov?
No, I'm in favor.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, looks like the motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Banner, for attending the call.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll go back to item 5A, SRCA-19-00014, R1 at 1100 South Robinson Avenue. We'll open it up for discussion.
Well, I guess that means me, since I'm the one who asked to pull it. So when I was listening to the Board of Adjustments, it came to my attention that perhaps the committee only reviewed this with regard to regulations and not to guidelines. And it's my understanding that we've been asked to review on both. And back in last year, September of 2019, we did vote for approval to an update to the downtown framework, DDF. And so I flipped through that and determined or read that it was a guideline that was adopted for future development in this area. And part of that guideline includes minimum heights that the city legislature, the planning department, city council view as a vision for developing this area in the future. So we had, it's dated 2015. We approved for an update in 19, and I don't think we discussed whether or not that should be under consideration for this item.
Okay, just before we go any further, I want to make sure John Joyce has removed himself from the discussion.
Thank you.
And the vote. Okay. All right.
I'd also like to just bring up in this discussion that after having watched the proceedings of the Board of Adjustment, it seemed the applicant's attorney's argument before the Board of Adjustment was centered around the wording of how the regulations were put together. And my understanding of that, not coming from a legal background, is that when two zoning regulations are in conflict, then the overlay supersedes. And so that would mean that the scenic river supersedes the downtown design district regulations. And in those, in that argument, the downtown design district requires minimum 2 stories, and the scenic river overlay does not have a requirement. It doesn't say there is no requirement. It just doesn't say anything at all. Katie Friddle from the planning department spoke up in that meeting and stated that it was, and Katie, I believe you're on the call. If she's not, maybe someone from the planning department can step in her stead. Please correct me if I misunderstood this. But my understanding was that the planning department's intent was not that there is no requirement, but that their intent was by not saying anything about a requirement, it would allow the downtown design district requirement to be the requirement in force. That was not how the applicant's attorney saw it. That was not how the Board of Adjustment saw it. But the Board of Adjustment also clarified that the ultimate ruling on this was with our committee. That's all I have to add, and somebody please speak up if I spoke out of turn on any of those items.
This is
Laura.
Katie Friddle.
Oh, good.
I was just going to say that we talked about several potential intents and purposes for the way that that language was worded. I was not around at the time that it was written as it currently stands, and neither were most of my colleagues. So it's hard to know exactly what, if something was done intentionally to guide a certain course, or if it was something that wasn't thought through, one way or the other. So I don't know what the intent was, but we had several thoughts about what the intent could have potentially been.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And this is Laura McDevitt, and I just wanted to add that the issue before the board was whether or not a variance was required to that regulation. And that's not to say that other guidelines or other things might be applicable to this particular site, but just now that a variance is not required for the height.
Right, and I don't, this is Barbara, I don't recall in our first discussion about this, whether or not we brought up the guideline. I think that we spoke about the zoning, the downtown and the overlay, but I don't think we ever looked at this guideline for future development in the area. So maybe the committee doesn't think that it's valid to even consider, but because there was a conflict, perhaps we might want to look at it.
I agree with Committee Member Larson. I have an understanding of what this board's scope and purview is and the regulations and guidelines that we act upon. I will rely heavily on the planning department and legal to keep us in line if we begin referencing articles that are outside of our purview or attempting to do something that is not within our ability to do. But with that being said, I do agree with Committee Member Larson that the downtown design framework is applicable to this site and should be considered in our deliberations.
Thank you, John. I just want to make a brief comment that, it's really a lot easier, if we look at the case before this one that we just approved as far as taking down an older structure. And then when a landowner wants to develop a clean, raw site, it's very easy to make those determinations of yes, go with the two-story guideline or recommendation. In this situation, we have a property owner who, they've looked at rebuilding the two-story, and as committee member Joyce said, that it's just not feasible. And I think this property owner is wanting to keep the first floor, intact, from a historical standpoint, making some of the improvements that they would like to make. We have a property owner ready to do something. It's one of the first ones in this area. And, it's unfortunate there were some conditions in the structural nature of this building that makes it very difficult to go with the 2-story. So I just want to throw that out there that I hate to penalize somebody for reaching out and taking this effort and being willing to invest in the community in this area. So that's all I have to say. So
I think I would echo those sentiments in that this board is very much in favor of investment within the Scenic River Overlay District, particularly in areas which have historically been underinvested in. However, I do think it's one of the primary purposes of this committee to ensure that development which happens within our purview is done according to the long-term benefit or the goals, the design vision of the city, specifically within the Scenic River Overlay District. I think that, well, speaking as the lone member of the committee which voted against the demolition of the cottonseed oil mill south of Bricktown, I'm very much in favor of keeping a historic structure, even if it's difficult to repurpose, if it has some potential architectural significance. The argument that I made the last time this case came before our board was that all the portions of this building at 1100 South Robinson, which in my opinion as an architect gave it architectural significance, have been removed over time due to previous owners, due to deterioration, due to weather, etc. That's certainly not on the current applicant, but it does make the reality of the building that, in my opinion, it doesn't have a great deal of architectural significance at the time. And weighing what little architectural significance I believe it does have against the location, the city is preparing to invest a great deal of money in building the Lower Scissortail Park. And this is a very crucial site in relation to that park. I find it very hard to believe that the market value of this site for the current applicant or someone else would not be sufficient to develop it into something that the downtown design framework has requested.
thank you, John.
I would also like to point out that I'm not against this. I just I want to remind everybody that if we do, we need to we are making a precedence whether we approve or disapprove this, and we need to remember that, and we need to remember why we made our decision, because we have this guideline in front of us in addition to the regulation. And so if we're discounting the guideline, we just need to be cognizant of that. Now, I agree with what Scott said, that, well, this is existing and it's not a clean site that somebody wants to develop and build on. And so, you know, the circumstances are a little bit different. I just wanted to make sure that we did have this discussion.
Thank you, Barbara.
This is
Yeah,
Committee Member Templeton. Can I ask a question too?
Go ahead, Dana.
From legal, maybe. In the Board of Adjustments video, they were talking about, well, that this overlay takes precedence. And when is that like a precedent from now on? So maybe where Greg Banta is going to build, that he doesn't have that, also doesn't have that 2-story minimum? Or does that just apply to this one building?
It would, the board's interpretation is that the DTD2 2-story minimum height requirement doesn't apply to this particular district. So I would say, though, that does not mean that other guidelines wouldn't necessarily apply. It was limited to that specific provision,
Okay.
if that answers
Well,
your
I was
question.
just talking about the minimum two-story requirement. So, okay.
One objection I had, not particularly to any one entity, but just to the situation in general, with the discussion before the Board of Adjustment was, in Planning Department, please correct me if I misunderstood this. It's my understanding that the DTD2 regulations, the Scenic River Overlay regulations, both predate the plans for and the site of the Lower Scissortail Park. And so it's my belief that those guidelines and regulations need to be updated to better address the development surrounding the Lower Scissortail Park. Planning Department, have I misunderstood this, or am I out of turn in suggesting that?
This is Laura from the Planning Department. I am sorry, because I don't know when the whole park concept came about, but the DTD2 was done toward the beginning of 2007 when that was created, and then the SRODD overlay was created toward the end of 2007. So that's at least part of the answers to your question. I just don't know when the park concept came through.
Okay, I don't know. I'm assuming that it's not within the scope of this board to write policy, and it's certainly not what I would like to do in the scope of this meeting, or particularly with regards to this application. And so I want to tread carefully and not trying to make this about what we think it should be, if that is in conflict with what the Planning Department has said they think it should be, because that's their purview and not ours. So that's why I'm asking for clarification.
Okay, it looks like our applicant, Vicky Van Stavern, would like to say a few words. Vicky?
Yes. I just wanted to say that the guidelines are something that I did scrupulously try to adhere to in my first application, which is why the first floor had a different material than the second floor, which came under scrutiny. But that's what the guidelines call for. It seemed that staff was really interested more in having a historical restoration of this property. And so in my new application, once we determined that a second floor was not viable, it's all brick. It will look very much like the original building. And if those drawings could be shown, I think you'll see that this would be a very nice, high quality, one-story commercial building, attractive on this corner.
Cameron, I'm sorry, go to slide 31, please, and then go forward from there.
We anticipate a future green roof on this. I think coming over the bridge, it's going to be very pretty. And the other option is that it's destroyed because we can't do a two-story. We do anticipate, hopefully, in the future, going behind this building and doing a maybe 8 to 10 story structure when the economy is able to support that kind of development. I've been told both by the contractor and by advisors that Oklahoma City isn't really ready for that. But the guidelines encourage that if a building is higher, that it's behind the street front. So all of that is something to be considered. Either we have a blank empty lot here for I don't know how long, or we have a very nice one-story building that will allow for future higher development behind this one-story street front, which is in conformance to the guidelines.
Thank you, Vicki. Are there any other committee members that would like to speak or have questions?
I would just like to make a comment. This is Committee Member Templeton. I do feel that the south part of the park, Scissortail Park, has a totally different feel to it. And the Hubcap Alley is something that I've always thought of as being, and it's not as grand as maybe the north part of the Scissortail Park. And I think one-story buildings are fine here in this area. And I think that starting, of course, like Ms. Van Staveren said, this is a front and center location that's going to start the trend or set the feel for the rest of the area. But it is going to start now, where Mr. Banta's property may be years down the road. We don't know, but at least we're getting one foot in the door and starting to build property back. And I do like the idea that maybe this is not a two-story fancier building for the Hubcap Alley area. Just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. Are there any questions by the public or comments? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion.
I'd like a clarification, Scott, based on what you said. So the minimum height guideline in the DDF is 2 stories for this area. I'm a little confused as to the overlay being none, but and in conflict with the downtown, which is, and so therefore there is no restriction. And so if I understood, Scott, your comment was that you prefer to, or you're suggesting that we look at the minimum height guidelines in the DDF only for new construction, and if something's already there, we just need to take it into consideration and then make a decision.
Well, I mean, this is about one of the only buildings that remains standing, I think, almost. And I think it wasn't, I don't know that I was trying to set precedent, but I had discussions with planning department as far as, when you look at the street frontage and redeveloping an area, I'm all for 100% where you have the buildings right up on the right of way. I think that's a very strong component with urban planning. And I asked the question, if you had a 1-story building on the corner, doesn't that provide opportunity for land or property owners behind you to have taller buildings that also benefit of the same view that you have because they're taller? And I just think there are various opportunities. I personally, I don't know that I would like to see all 2-story buildings. I like a variety of heights just to provide some, more dynamic movement along the street front. So I think varying heights is a good thing. We have the unique situation where, like I said, this is one of the few buildings that is existing and has some historical context. And I would like to see that a little bit preserved. I mean, because really there's not much left of Auto Alley that has any quality per se. So.
Well, the guidelines actually state that 2 is the minimum. It doesn't say that everything developed there is limited to 2 stories. So I just wanted to point that out. But
right.
I agree with Scott that it's probably desirable to have a variation in building heights. Although I would say if you would choose one location to put a taller building, it would be on the corner, particularly such a powerful corner next to the park and the bridge and the highway where there's not much else of height around it. I think that I think that the entire lower Scissortail Park is going to get lined with development before an 8 to 10 story building happens on this property.
Okay.
One more comment from me, please.
Sure.
I agree with John, but I also would like to interject my own personal opinion. As you're coming over that and you see that corner, I think if you had a taller building there, it could possibly mask the buildings behind it, and you wouldn't be able to see the ones behind it. But I do think if you're coming over the bridge and there is that one story there, and as Ms. Van Staveren stated that they were talking about putting a green roof on there, I think that would be appealing in case you did have a second story building behind it. It would be attractive and show variance, and it's not going to block out any other views from coming over the bridge.
A green roof isn't on the existing proposal, is it? I don't recall.
This is Laura. It is not listed under the scope of what's up for your consideration today.
This is John Joyce. I would say the important thing is the roof structure for that building is being designed to support a green roof. So, I mean, whether it's shown or not, I don't know that that's really relevant. But the point is that when we rebuild the building, the structure is going to support a green roof. So when she talks about that, that's what she's implying. You can't just start stacking up a bunch of landscaping on an existing building. It has to be able to support it.
All right.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So the structure, I haven't looked at the drawings or the loading. So the structure for a green roof is substantially less than the members that would be required for a second story.
No, that is not true. It's just that it's kind of, well, maybe comparable, but definitely more than what's required just for a roof.
All right.
A green roof would be a greater load.
So the objection to putting multiple stories on this property is not that it's structurally incapable of supporting multiple stories. The objection is that the applicant doesn't think it's economically feasible. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think it could support a second story, certainly nothing more than that.
Does it have to do with the cost of the second story materials versus the cost of the green roof? The green materials?
Mr. Chair, if I could interject here, these questions that are being brought up might be best answered by the applicant who appears to want to speak.
Thank you, John. Vicki, would you like to weigh in on that?
Unmute.
Vicki, you need to unmute. Thank you so much.
We have always wanted to do a green roof, but the planning for that, specifically the landscape plan, is something that we're not prepared to do at this time. We wanted to get the building done first, and John has, even in our first two-story option, we planned for a green roof. One of the advantages and what's of value here is this very sturdy concrete structure that has already been reinforced and renovated at great cost in order to support this building, the one-story building. Because there's a concrete roof structure already there, it will be able to support the green roof material. We're talking about an extensive green roof, not an intensive. But the planning hasn't been done for that, the landscape plan, and that's why you don't see it on this application. The cost of the infrastructure to build a second floor since it was originally a one-story building. So there's no place for a stair. The stair has to be added on. That's an addition. If it's going to be used for commercial purposes, we'd have to put in an elevator. And there's only 2,500 square feet. It just doesn't weigh out. You know, if we could go taller, and that's something that I talked to John about when we were trying to make this work. Could we do 4 stories, you know, and then adding the stair and the elevator and the fire suppression system, which is, as you all know, very expensive, would, you know, weigh out. But this site will not allow that. So it's just not economically viable option on this particular structure, which is of value to us, to do more than 1 story.
Okay, thank you, Vicki.
So the design was done for the 2-story before doing any kind of a budget or analysis.
We had budget and analysis for what we thought it would cost, but it was came in extremely more than double what we had anticipated.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
I just add that I agree with a lot of sentiments made. I know it's a difficult site. I know it's an existing structure. I do see the DDF on page 13 kind of gives some example hopeful developments along that frontage, and think that you know, that's really what I agree with the developers of the DDF. That's hopefully what we get along this park, and maybe, you know, the structure to the south will benefit from being able to look over this structure and look to the downtown, and then also look across the park. So hopefully future developments to the south will be able to take advantage of the location and the opportunities here. And you know, a lot of times there's, as far as urban development goes, 1 stories are sometimes demolished and raised higher. So maybe it pencils out later on in the future once additional developments are made along this frontage, and we see something different on that corner.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Well, the chair would entertain a motion. Anybody?
I would move to disapprove the application.
Do we have a second?
I have a second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Jennifer, can we, let's put it to a vote.
Just to clarify, the vote is to yay, is to disapprove.
Correct.
This is Katie. Can we just clarify, it's to deny the application? Is that correct? We don't have a motion to disapprove typically. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, that's a misspeaking on my part. My motion was to deny the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Commissioner
Brian,
Doherty, how would you like to vote on this item?
And vote against it.
Are there any other members that need help voting in PrimeGov?
I'm sorry, can we get that screen back, or is that not possible? I was trying to make, I think I saw where there were 5 people that voted for the motion to deny and 4 that voted against the motion, but I wanted to confirm that.
I saw 4 and 1 abstention, which should be John Joyce.
There we go. Thank you. So, Jennifer, what vote did you get? 4, 4, and 1 on that vote?
Yes.
Okay. And did you get everyone's name down? Who voted what?
Yes.
Okay. So, Chair, and I guess we'll have legal has to weigh in. We have 4 people voted for the denial, 4 people voted against the denial, and then we had 1 abstention. So can you clarify what that actually means and what the next step would be?
This is Laura McDevitt. The motion did not pass.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
We need to vote
So
again. Or what happens?
yeah.
So a committee member could either make a motion to approve, and if there were a second, there could be a second vote on the item, or there could just be no action on the application.
And if no action were taken on the application, what would be the result?
Yeah, this doesn't come up all that frequently, as you might suspect, but I believe how we've handled it before is that the committee takes no action, then that is able then to be appealed to the Board of Adjustment.
And Laura,
Katie, am I?
Laura
Okay.
Griggs, and I would also say if there is no action, then the original approval of this project is still in place, correct?
Right, when, as it is currently, because no action has been taken by the committee.
Correct. Okay.
This is Katie. Laura, are they, Laura McDevitt, they also have the ability to continue it again, correct?
Correct.
If the applicant agrees to that.
And then theoretically, if there were additional information that the applicant wanted to present to attempt to get a different vote, but I believe we have everybody here today who's able to vote on the application.
So to be clear, so what do we do now? I mean, do we look for a motion to continue or?
Whatever committee member wants to make the next motion, either to continue or to approve, there would be a subsequent vote, provided that there's a second on that.
Okay, well, let's say we have a second vote and we have the same outcome. Are we still at the same place?
Then there's still no action on the item. And then if there's no action, then I think it would be automatically continued without any further vote.
Okay. So Chair would entertain a motion for a second vote.
this is Gloria. I'm sorry. Can I go ahead and just motion for continuance?
Yes, you may. Do we have a second for a motion to
Excuse me,
continue?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
What date do you want to continue to, please? What meeting date?
I would say next month, November 5th.
This is Laura Griggs, just to caution you, if you continue to next month, if there's additional information, I have to have it by next Tuesday.
Okay. Do we have a second to Gloria's motion? Anybody? Okay, I guess we don't have a second. So
This is Gloria. I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. So I
This
guess
is-
this,
Well, this is committee member Templeton. Is there any reason? I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the consideration and possible action on this application.
okay, thank you, Dana. Do we have a second for that?
This is Brian. I second it.
Thank you, Brian. Any further discussion? Let's put it to a vote, please. The motion was by, the second was by Brian Doherty.
Mr. Doherty, this is Jennifer.
I
Does that
vote in
mean that you
favor.
vote
I vote in
favor? Thank
favor.
you.
Okay, am I correct? It looked like the motion passed?
This is Laura Griggs. It looked like there were 5 yeses, 3 nos, and 1 abstention. Is that what you got, Jennifer?
Yes, Laura, that is correct.
So the motion passed for approval of this application for the revision.
Okay, thank you. Item 7A, other business, none. Item 8, Laura, would you like to say anything on the communications?
I anticipate that we're going to have a meeting next month. And I anticipate that it will still be a video conference. I haven't heard otherwise. I know that the current state law, I believe it's November 15th is when all those regulations expire, but your meeting is on the 5th. So, but I will let you all know as soon as I've got that one locked in.
Okay, thank you. Item 8C, comments from committee members. All right, item 8D, next meeting date is November 5th, 2020. And hope you all stay safe and look forward to seeing you then. So we'll call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.